Hello there, friends. This is Hank with your pajama scholar with ambient glow radio presentation. And today's presentation is a little bit more serious because it's pressing, and this is in regards to the environmental changes that I believe most of society, most of the world, is sleepwalking into, while they bicker about economics or politics or war or many other things. When we know that we have food shortages that are coming. We have all of pretty much South America that's lights out right now. We have serious issues with the magnetosphere. But fear not, it is survivable. This type of thing has happened in history before. As I've said previously, I believe in one of my real life discussions, I believe that cataclysms are cyclic and humans have been surviving them on Earth for a very long time. But I also feel like at this point in history, several generations seem to have lacked conscience for whatever reason, a true spiritual awakening. So all the things that I believe ancient civilizations were able to cooperate with and develop in order to ensure pockets of survival during these cataclysms have essentially been denied to pretty much the whole of us. Like, for example, I know there are many things that I can do. I've studied this for years upon years, ever since I noticed that the world is not what I was told it was to be, and too many things didn't add up. And once I started to uncover one lie that led to another, I started to see the truth. And now that I know the truth, or at least a part of it, I understand that cooperation is vital. Now, I've put together a series of different plans for survival and sustainability. I mean, I worked in geotechnical inspections, soil surveys, watching construction, understanding soil. I've been a house painter, so I understand color and beauty, and I understand hard work. I've always looked at things in the sense of cost-benefit analysis, so I've been trying to examine ways to accomplish some sort of enclave or exclave where people of conscience could go and they would have the resources to be able to eat, to live freely, be secure, have some model of self-sustainability. Because if you're wise and you're in my generation, you know that we've been denied the economic opportunities that would create the conditions that would enable us to implement these solutions to protect ourselves from what is coming. I've waited over a decade for a market correction. And I'm losing time in my life to get these things done. And I can't convince, just like Noah, I can't convince the people around me of the severity of the situation because they have a normalcy bias. People that don't study history, that don't look at cycles, they have a very limited perspective, and their perspective is what they've seen in their lives. And a human life is a relatively short thing. You would think at best, at present, it would be about 100 years, which is not very much time at all in the large, grander scope of things. So, just because your parents didn't live through this change, or their parents didn't live through this change, does not mean that changes don't come, because they do. History shows us this. And there are many vectors that we have to deal with right at the moment. Now, I am resolute. I have more than one plan. And, some people would say, well, we're all going to die anyway, blah, blah, blah. Let's just sit back and wait for it to happen and have a beer and relax and chill out. And when it comes, it comes. But I've been on the edge. I've faced death. And in those moments when you face death, you wish that you had done something differently. And since that time, since that awakening of understanding of conscience, I just don't want to perish like a fool, knowing the things that are to come. I want to do everything in my power to ensure at least some level of comfort, because there are situations that are not going to be survivable. I have no issue with dying. Death is as natural as life. I expect it. I have no fear of it. But I don't want to die in ignorance. I don't want to look at my life and say, I didn't do everything that I could. If I get caught in a situation, and it is what it is, I died, but I went out doing everything that I could in the best way that I could. So, being denied these economic opportunities to engage in the solutions that I've researched, I look at it and I say, for the vast majority of human consciousness, things are not going to change in their brains until they're actually confronted with the difficulty of a situation, and then they're going to be more pliable. They come to me and they ask me, and they feel good, that they're on the what they call the zombie apocalypse team or whatever. People tease me and make fun of me, and I'm very much used to that, and I expect that. This is demonstrated over and over and over again in history by, anybody that's looking ahead. An activist, a visionary, a scientist is going to be persecuted. A philosopher, a religious leader, a messiah, all the most spiritually pure people, they're persecuted for the vast amount of human ignorance, their unwillingness to want to learn, to listen, to love. Although I know they're capable, and I love them still, but my grandmother told me something years ago after, see, I fled from my home where my family was because I wanted to embark on a different path, another adventure. And I didn't want to bring all that pain that I felt in myself, some things I needed to discover for myself. Like my friend Ackerman, the artist, he says that he has a love or a romance with destiny, or a romance or something with immortality, something like that. To be able to leave a legacy. Well, in that same vein, but totally contrary, and this is an emotional issue for me, and I'm trying to be as honest as possible and still try and retain my clarity and peace, because I don't like to reflect on these days. But I never thought that I would live. I didn't want to, not past 20 something, mid-20s. I think they say it in what was one of my friend Tommy's favorite bands, Alice in Chains. Never thought I'd live past 25, something like that. And certainly not past 33, and that's when Jesus Christ died. I said, well, if I made it past Jesus Christ, I'd be doing really good. I'd be satisfied. I'd be happy with that. My romance was not with eternity. It was with death. Because what I had seen I had a very warped view of humanity. I didn't believe that there was good or beauty in the world. I didn't. I hated it. I hated the people. I hated the earth. I hated it all. And I developed the skills necessary to protect myself. Like, a bully doesn't, a person doesn't get bullied by bullies if you're the worst bully that there ever was. And it was my delight to strike deeply into the hearts and minds so they would fear me. Setting up grand and elaborate schemes, pitting people against each other, all just even quietly and surreptitiously or overtly. I can even remember one time when I was in grade school, a kid stabbed me with a pencil in the hand, and by lunch, he sat alone. And that was devastating to him, and I enjoyed it. I enjoyed that type of thing. I felt like I had won, when in fact I had won nothing at all. I had destroyed a piece of myself. And so when I embarked on my journey, I found a collection of people who also too were outcasts. Some would call them, they just didn't fit into society. Some were addicts, others were criminals. One was a brawler from St. Louis. Another was running from drug addictions and all the addictive personalities that were around him up north, and came here, and we ended up developing a friendship, a collective of people that were, you could consider them to be unstable because we all had an infatuation with death. We lived on the edge. We took it to the edge. We took it to the extreme because we didn't care if we lived or we died. And we loved it. But we survived because we took care of each other and we cared for each other, and we actually grew and found things in this collection of misfits. Brotherly love, the code, the moral code, a man's code, the code of honor, where your word is everything, your bond. We didn't steal from each other. Anybody that came in, there were instances. One of them, we would resolve disputes. Because when you have strong personalities that do drugs, drink alcohol, and are fighters, you're going to have disputes. And we would always, we created this thing called a lanai talk. And it was a bit of a sanctuary. It's like, okay, whatever you had going on in here, we're going to go out, and we always go out in three, to arbitrate, to discuss. You leave your anger in when you go out on the lanai. There's no yelling, there's no shouting because you're outside, you don't hear any voices. It's like a movement, a transition from one environment to the other where the rules change, and then you just sit and you honestly talk it out as honestly as you feel. You lay it all out there, all on the line, wide open. And generally speaking, there wasn't anything that we couldn't resolve. And once we came to a resolution, we stuck to it. And that was that. And it worked very well. Now, there were instances where we had, the guy, one of my friend Douglas from St. Louis, had a cousin, Tony, who he felt would benefit from this collective, this band of misfits that we were all living together and loving life and learning how to really live and love with a degree of security and protection, because we looked after each other. And he wanted Tony, who had drug problems and stuff, to become part of this, because even though we loved to party, we were starting to develop self-control. We were starting to develop, because we had to look out for each other. There was a certain limit that a certain rule that you had to abide by. It was an unspoken rule, but something that you had to do to make sure that your brothers were safe. And we wanted Tony to come down, but we find that this guy, if there's a bottle of vodka in the freezer, before we would get home from work, because we would work together to earn some cash or whatever, instead of asking for the drink that we would have poured freely, he would steal it and then pretend like we wouldn't notice, or pour himself a generous amount and leave and take it somewhere else. It's what we called being on the sneak tip. Big taboo, big no-no. And so even though there was that familial tie, that blood tie, we were still able to resolve it in the Lanai talk. We say, all right, we've got a character here who is not respecting or is being respectful of what we would give freely. It's a person of shady character. And ultimately, he was exiled, and he went on to screw it up more, and then back up to north he went. He got into cocaine, ruined his bank accounts, and he was off. But in those times, just even the toughest guys were the knee breakers, the guys with the flames tattooed to the side of their head. They recognize a good human being when they see it. It was always my great joy to feed people when they would come in. I always looked at it. It's like, all right, well, you guys can spend $500 tonight for the party, and I'll spend whatever I have and make sure we've got a good meal to eat. So we have a moment of convalescence. It means a lot to guys on the street to come in and get a meal and to eat together. We had a Haitian friend that would come over, and we would make these rice dishes, and we would share all sorts of different things in the community. And the door was open. You'd knock on it, and you could come in and you could talk. I mean, it wasn't without its risk. I've had loaded guns stuck in my face multiple times. 3, to the best of my recollection right at the moment. But I can tell, I can look into a person's eyes, and I can tell when they intend to do me harm. And when the man with the gun knocked on my door, I knew he'd been doing too many drugs. And he had 380 stuck right in my chest because he was convinced that I was hacking his computer or some such thing, because he had seen all these notes I was taking when I was deconstructing a game. He couldn't understand the code. But of course, he's getting high every night and messing around on those porn sites. And of course, you put your credit card number in there and you're going to get robbed. And he was wondering where all his money was going. And he was convinced, well, it's got to be somebody that because he didn't really fully understand the internet. But all I did was smile at him and invite him in. It's like, he didn't want to shoot me. I knew that. He didn't want to shoot me. He wanted to see what my expression would be, to see if maybe I was the one that was responsible. But real recognizes real. When you're under pressure and you're under stress or whatever, it's revealing. Your character's revealing. And when you invite a man that just pointed a gun at your chest into your home, and you say, all right, here's all the notes, look, relax, let's talk about what's going on. And then we end up having a good time, celebrating. He leaves understanding, knowing the whole time that he was my friend and I wasn't going to betray him, and that my love for him was such that I wasn't afraid of him or even to die by his hand. And those are strong bonds. But as things go, and this is divine providence. I always believe as the river flows, God took me in the direction where I needed to return home. There were issues I had to look after for my family, especially after having gone through this transformative experience. I came back a totally different person. I spent many years kind of what I call as a monk on a mountaintop, where I lived in a very austere environment with very few creature comforts. For the most part, alone. With my books, no internet, no television. I did have a Xbox 360 I played, and radio, CD player and stuff I would use to be able to dance, to get exercise, stay in shape, and such. And my library. And then I would invite a few of my childhood friends over once a week, and we would play cards and things. But it was basically a monastic experience, avoiding all the Facebook and all the nonsense. It really helped me gain a perspective, an evolution in perspective based on what I had seen before. And I'll be a little bit more revealing about the continuation of that experience, because that's where the specter of death really arrived. That was 40 days of not eating. And that's why I guess the religious texts extol the virtues of fasting, because I guess once you're past about 30 days, you start to have visions. You start to see, understand. You're starting to get things that you didn't get before. So I'll elaborate on that perhaps at another time. So it's this level of cooperation that I'm looking forward to with enlightened, wizened, educated individuals who are past the pettiness and know about the challenges of the future, so that they can be discussed. That I could have people that were educated enough, wise enough, that we could learn, love, design, build, and live in harmony without me having to try and start to do this all over again by myself. Because it's a heavy, burdensome task. I know I can do it, but I don't have the strength to dig every trench, to haul every stone, to consistently reinvent the wheel, because I know these things already exist. And I just do not believe it is necessary to reinvent the wheel, because there's injuries that are involved. There's trial and error, experimentation. People have spent their entire lives developing these different systems that work wonderfully and beautifully. And I would rather not spend my entire life reinventing the wheel that I know is out there, and I can prove it. I'm going to show you just a couple of things that I've been looking at, or not just looking at, but studying. I mean, I take notes, extensive notes, on all manner of things, and I keep a library, because you can lose a whole lot, but if you have a book that you can go to reference, you don't have to keep it all in your memory. If you have notes, you don't have to keep it all in your memory. You can say, oh, I remember this or that, and where it could be useful, and you know where to gather that information, and you can survive even in difficult conditions. And this is what I talk about, having backup plan upon backup plan upon backup plan. Of course, my preferred way of living would be to find like-minded individuals where we don't have to reinvent the wheel, and we can go on to develop new things and enjoy each other's company in that way, and not live these atomized, isolated, lonely lives. Denied economic freedom and liberty and all other manner of things. Let's see, which should I pull first? All right, I'll pull this one first because this is my this is energy for the most part. Okay. Let's be creative, you know. You get a free energy generator here. Now I've been doing my best to archive and note. You know, you have to. Any day it could be gone. You know, you've got all of Dollard's work, Tesla's work. These things exist. They've been around. The Searle, the SEG, the Bedini. It exists. It's been done. We don't have to reinvent the wheel. We don't need oil. We don't need solar. We've got over unity. We've got batteries. We've got the systems. This is Global BEM. They're doing great projects. And where I believe that I can be helpful is that I'm an excellent communicator. And I've been on the street, and as a street fighter, pit fighter. I've never shied away from danger or risk. I know that life is fleeting and relatively short, and it's what you do with it that's the important part. So I believe that these good ideas that we're seeing come from some global visionaries are unfortunately not being communicated in such a way that they can be accepted and forcefully implemented. You can explain a concept to me, and I'll take notes on it, and then I'll repeat back, essentially, what I think you've told me, and then you can tell me where I'm right, wrong, need to adjust, whether or not I got the gist of it. And then what I'm able to do is take advanced concepts and boil them down into layman's terms and be able to communicate with the most amount of people in a way that they can understand and make decisions on their own without manipulation, but with clarity. That's because of my history. When I was young, what did I do? I had to survive. I believed that my survival was based on my ability to manipulate. And then as I got older, I found that being a manipulator is not true to the spirit of self, and you deny yourself access to God, who ultimately we should all strive to be in service to. That's the real beauty of the whole thing. Ackerman asked the other day, what is beauty? It's about righteousness. It is about God. It is about what we do with our lives and for others. So that's where I feel like one of my talents can be valuable, very valuable. Because I know that, I've always been a nerd. They used to call me King of the Nerds because, I love nerds because I learn from them. They're the people that I respect. The people I respect the most are people that are smarter than I am, that have something to teach me where I don't understand. I love to shut up and listen and learn. So I love nerds because they've always challenged me, and I've considered myself a nerd. I'm freaking nerdy. But it challenges. It challenges. And then I saw the nerds as my people. And you wouldn't fuck with them, that's for sure. Because you don't fuck with a group of nerds. It's a bad idea. So this is Global BEM. I like their projects. But if you look at some of the presentations that they try to make, they're just not being very effective communicators. And I'm brutal, I'm critical, I'm honest. But I'm sensitive to a speaker or person's needs. I'm generally able to gauge what's going to hurt somebody, and I try not to do it. But I will apply enough of a sting, a critical enough of a sting to be able to get them to train themselves to be effective communicators. And in lieu of that, I will communicate what they would like to communicate, because some of the brightest people, they don't like to be seen. Some of the brightest people, they hate people, and for good reason. And a lot of times when you're a visionary, your mind is absorbed with concepts that other people are not going to readily understand. And because you already are educated in the right jargon, what's going to make sense to you and your colleagues is not going to make sense to the layman. So it's always been my goal, my talent, where I could see myself useful, would be able to take that jargon and turn it into something that can be understood, accepted, and loved by the layman. Okay. Green power science. It's all here. It's all here. There's so many solutions. Okay. Thermoelectric generator. Over unity Searle effect. Okay, we've got even more science in Breakaway. This is not the best playlist I've ever seen, but there's some interesting stuff in here. I've examined botany and horticulture, and how you can create synergistic farms that thrive. There's a great video down here at the bottom of what one guy did on an acre of land, creating these food forests. Because, well, I guess backup plan number 2, I'm not going to go into too much detail because I kind of keep a few things to myself. And I actually am going to keep this one to myself. I don't give everything away. I don't give everything away, but there's a lot here. Pete Canaris does a great job. Yet another showing over unity. More energy solutions. And I just don't, I'm only one man. How can I archive this all? How can I note this all? How can I learn this all? Why am I, as a single individual, trying to reinvent the wheel? I mean, look at what this guy has to go through. Harassment, police harassment, corruption, illegal trial, burns from experimentation of trying to build these things. And these would ultimately be things that I would end up, I could even be killed by trying to build something out there, where somebody else had already discovered it by trial and error, and it cost me my life. I'd do it, but I just don't think it's necessary for us to all be divided and broken like this. Let's take another look here. Now, I've always thought that one of the most critical components to anything moving forward is going to be communications. Now, basically, I've got about 4 different plans right now. One is reaching out with an honest and somewhat, I wouldn't say desperate plea, but definitely an honest one to like-minded individuals, where I wouldn't have to recreate the wheel, and that my talents, I could freely give of myself whatever would be required to be an assistant to an aid to their projects. The second would be to try and very quickly, once the economy takes a dive and people start to really realize the food shortages, start to realize the severity and gravity of the situation, for the individuals that I've collected so far, I've kind of been quietly observing and analyzing different people and what their skills and strengths are, and how to protect them and what would be required, and then at that point, when it was staring them in their face, they would have no choice but to say, okay, all right, I get it. What do we do now? And I would bam, 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 bam. I'd have all this stuff lined out, ready to move, ready to act. But once it gets to that point, everything becomes so much harder because resources are harder to get. The money doesn't go as far if it still exists. Transportation might be shut down. People might be getting violent. You have to deal with hunger. These things need to be addressed ahead of time, and I just cannot get people to break out of that frame of mind. So let's take a look at communications, which I've always thought is very important. See, that's just regular YouTube. Okay. All the ham radio stuff, censor-free communication. It can be intercepted, but hey, it is what it is. Let me see if I can find. Okay, this is like a ham mesh, which could be carried out and deployed across the city. And I can go into detail about this type of stuff later. But I can keep grids running, however we want to deploy them. Send them up. There's a whole group of people that climb the highest stuff for thrills. Well, I just send them up to the top of TV, radio towers, top of churches, church steeples, and deploy these alternative grids. And just more information. Some censor-free comms. Morse code's vital to learn. But this is the Raspberry and ham mesh that we're talking about. This is all. Everybody should know how to make their own tools, especially lock-picking tools. It's not very hard. When I was a kid, my mother worked for a company called the Mirror Company, and they sold like fixtures and locks and glass, mirrors, shower doors, stuff like that. And she used to bring home sample locks, and when I was a kid, I used to love to take them apart and play with them and pick them and stuff. So it's just been a hobby. And then there's the shorter term survival solutions that and security arrangements that you need to be kind of familiar with. And I've grown to have a great deal of respect for the American militia, or at least the portion of it that I've had the opportunity to communicate with, because the way that they communicate, they're more moral than the clergy. They're more in touch and wiser than professors of the humanities. They're more apt at predicting the future than professional historians. They understand the spirit of the law above the letter of it, and I've been thoroughly impressed with the conduct of the American militia that I've had the opportunity to communicate with. And unfortunately, in a dangerous world where resources are stretched, security is a consideration. Now, I don't consider myself to be a fighter. I know how to do it, but I don't want to. I want to develop a system, a secure system, a camouflage system, one of abundance with multiple layers of mazes and diversions, so everybody is secure without violence, and always be a safe haven for the fighters. Keep them fed, keep them happy, keep them entertained, so that if it's required, if fighting is required, there are men that can do it. This is just information here on how to make tools out of nothing, because if it gets to the point where, well, the group of, I can't reach out to a group that kind of has it all together, I'm going to have to develop my own tools by scrapping under a tight time frame. Okay, this is just, we've already been through this energy stuff here. So, I was thinking a missile silo would be a fun way to go. There's a lot of complications involved with that, but it's possible. And then you've got, Earthship style constructions and berms. Because I believe the greenhouses we're going to need interior greenhouses, of course. So the solutions are there. Working hard on building the Limestone Monastery to make sure that we're safe. And then once the environmental considerations are taken care of, then we can move on to produce fine woodwork, art, I can't imagine how enjoyable it would be to be able to carve beautiful table legs and cabinet doors and handmade things that would be really valuable in trade. So I guess that's pretty much all I really want to go into on the Breakaway Civilization Limestone Monastery thing today. I just wanted to express the gravity of the situation and why everybody needs to get serious and think about it. I mean, I'm not trying to bullshit anybody here. Take a look at one last thing. Here's your pole shift news. It's a real deal. It's not bullshit. I have seen with my own eyes the skies turn red at midnight or a little after. I've seen the celestial bodies out of order. I've seen orbs in the sky. As as far as the alien disclosure and all that stuff goes. I've seen the triangular shaped crafts floating right after a little electrical storm we had right over at the golf course right next door. Kara called me on the phone, and well, I went out and looked at it. She saw it, and I saw it. There it was, triangle-shaped craft, just as clear as day, floating over just as silent as can be. And then I walk outside a couple of days ago, and there's no less than 4 drones coming in from the west, northwest, and 2 orbs that kind of look like stars. They could be mistaken for stars that are just kind of going around like this, through the sky above me. And I pray that God has a greater task for me. I feel I'm trying to do the Lord's will, but I feel like I can do more. All right. That's been Hank. I'll catch you guys on the flip side.